Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I am Ujjwal Trivedi again. Some of you might be shocked because of my new avatar, and but yeah, this is still me, and this is all thanks to my uncle. May he find peace. So I am here in the culture city of Indore in central India, and I am hosting this event from here today. And my guest is a very interesting personality, Jasnoor Gill, who is now with Nutanix and has done some amazing work at Zynga and at Calm. And I'd love for Jasnoor to actually give more introduction about himself, and then we'll talk about a few more things. So very quickly about me, I'm senior director of products with Move and Sync, and I am also a director at Headstart. And Headstart is doing this every day. It's an startup hour, an hourly sort of a daily show, which through the entire September, which we now have named as Startup September, right? Because if there is no shave November, then why not Startup September, right? So that was the plain and simple logic. And so we are getting every day we are talking to three big personalities, and over to Justin.
Cool, man. Thanks, Ujjwal. So I guess quick introductions, right? And history. So I have like 4 minutes of prep for this with Ujjwal, right? In terms of what he's going to ask me. So it's all it should be interesting. Background wise, I have been a product manager for 13 years, give or take, right? I was actually counting today before this presentation thing. How long have I been doing this? Across that time, I have worked for 2 startups and 2 large companies that went IPO, right? So been an interesting small big journey, mostly on the enterprise software and SaaS side of things, right? I did work at Zynga, but I did a lot of platform stuff at Zynga, right? So the backend for the gaming platform, I did try out the games side for like 6 months, and I figured out I'm happier on the enterprise side of the house, right? What else? Before Nutanix, so Nutanix is not really a startup, I guess, in the sense of the word. It's probably a 12, 13-year-old company at this point. And it's a public company, so I have to be careful on what I talk about. But that said, before Nutanix, I used to work for a startup out of Bangalore that did automation, right? So not very cool and interesting. But again, we sold to enterprise customers, got a bunch of Indian customers, some US customers, and at some point we essentially got bought out by Nutanix because they wanted automation, the tech that we were building essentially. So now I run a cloud management product for Nutanix, which has components of the automation stack that we brought over from an acquisition perspective. But it's essentially a bigger suite of products that focuses on operating, managing, and running your data center, right? Or your public cloud. So it's very much on the application management side of the house, right? So we don't see consumers so much. My consumers are large enterprises who are either running their own stuff on premise, which is a majority of our business. But we also have a chunk of business from customers who want to run on AWS, Azure, or GCP kind of stuff globally. Interesting business, interesting things you see. The media has obviously one side of things where everything is AWS and Jeff Bezos has made his money and that's what everyone will use forever. But when you actually look at the data, you realize how humongous the market is and how large a space there is for a lot of people to be trying out different things in the space.
Right, cool. So tell us a little more about what Nutanix does, and maybe double click on the last thing that you said about the market being humongous. How many large cloud players do you do you think there are, or maybe not think, but you know how many there are? And because a lot of people might just know about AWS and Azure, right? So why don't you enlighten us a little more about this market?
Sure. Let me give you a quick 101 on Nutanix in general, right? So Nutanix was founded on the concept that we would essentially do what we used to call hyper-converged infrastructure long back.
Right.
But in simplest form, what it said was we can take x86 servers, pool them together, commodity servers. So, Intel chips, Samsung RAM, Seagate hard drive, whatever you want, but pretty standardized server stack. And all the intelligence will migrate to the software layer. The other model, which is the traditional big iron, the 90s and even after 2000, the model, let's say before 10 years ago, was essentially the SAN model. That's the EMC, NetApp kind of thing. You buy this big box that has your storage, and the servers actually consume that storage kind of thing, right? The challenge, of course, is it's a big module. So you have to size your smallest storage box is still going to support, I don't know, 500 servers maybe. So you can't do anything smaller than that. You can only, let's say, do capacity pieces in terms of planning for 500 servers at a time, right? At its simplest.
Right.
And you had separate networking equipment and things like that. What, interestingly enough, Google and Facebook, as two of the biggest companies, when they started really growing and building their infrastructure, what they figured out is that this model is very, very expensive, right? Because you're paying a NetApp and an EMC and a Dell for a lot of custom hardware that they produce and they control. And so these companies went and said, why can't we use x86? And there's a ton of stories if you read about the early days of Google and Facebook and how they managed it. But essentially, they ended up building all the tech in the software layer, right? So they said, if I lose hardware, I will keep 3 copies of data, right? So Hadoop came out of Yahoo, actually, interestingly enough, which has a similar concept. You're keeping 2 to 3 copies of all your data. Right. Google has Google file system. Facebook has, I'm sure, whatever they call it. Right. But that was the concept, and companies were already doing it in-house at that point. Saying, this is how you save money, and this is how you scale to build large environments. And AWS does that internally, right? Yeah. You of course don't see that part of it. And Nutanix was essentially founded on the premise that we are going to build similar tech by a bunch of people who were ex-Google and ex-Oracle and so on. And we are going to commercialize that tech. So you no longer need expensive SANs. You just need a standard commodity server that you buy from a Dell, Lenovo, HP, Supermicro, which is cheaper, let's put it that way, right? And we will run a software layer on top that will take care of all your failure, DR, running the VMs, things like that, right? So at a very, very high level, that is what Nutanix ends up doing. And there are multiple products in the stack which provide different functionality and so on. But that's the core of the business. So today we partner with almost every server vendor. So Dell, Lenovo, Cisco, HP, you can buy a product line from them that comes with Nutanix software pre-installed, or you can go through Nutanix and we'll sell you the software license, and we'll plug in a partner who will sell you the hardware. And essentially that's what you run on your data center. We also partner with the AWS and Azure of the world, moving to the public cloud side of the house. They both provide what they call bare metal as a service. So they actually now also provide servers which are not running any of their software layers. So we can actually run our software on their platform as well. For us, it's another server, think that way. The advantage being that companies that want to quickly move a huge chunk of workloads to the cloud, or they just want to use cloud as a failover or a disaster recovery destination, they can actually move everything as is. So it makes the lift and shift very, very easy, essentially. And then there's advantages around density and cost, because you can pack a large number of VMs on one of those servers versus buying, let's say, 100 VMs from AWS as an example, things like that. Right. So that's the business model. So we sell that software layer to enable our customers to do this.
Got it. Interesting. Cool. So you also, talked about a little bit about, how you tried your hands at non-enterprise product and product management, and then you came back to enterprise product management. What did you feel is a difference, and what do you feel So two things. One is, what is like the standard, difference that people feel there is, but I'd like to go and tell you. I'd like you to tell more about what actually brought you back here, what you find more sorted or interesting here versus what you did not like in the consumer software.
So I think while consumer software is obviously interesting, but heck, I use all sorts of consumer software apps, and I have strong opinions about a lot of them. But that said, I think one of the biggest things about an enterprise software app versus a consumer software app is, once the initial app is done, right, or once your website is up, let's put it that way, a lot of focus is on metrics, right? In some cases, if you are on the e-commerce side or so on, pretty much your entire focus is on metrics and conversion and making sure that a little tweak here will change something by 0.5%, which will result in probably, I don't know, $10 million increase in revenue and things like that. And I saw the online game side of it as well, where again, same thing, you have 100,000 users coming, maybe 1,000 of them pay you money, and that 1,000 has to pay you enough money to run the game, make a profit, things like that, which is interesting, the kind of scale you see, of course, right? On consumer. The thing is, it becomes a very Excel game when I look at it, right? It's very, very number focused, number crunching and tweaking little things. Big changes are fewer, right? Once the first part is done, once the 101 is done. On the other hand, in enterprise, and again, I guess if you are going down to maybe SMB or even very small customers, if you have millions of customers, yes, you are probably back at the same place. But traditional enterprise software, even SaaS to a large extent, while you will look at metrics and so on, you end up talking a lot more to your customer, right? Outside of maybe a initial focus group, when you build a consumer facing app, how many PMs actually go talk to an actual user of the app on a regular basis, right? That becomes one of those, let's call it a challenge, right? Again, it's just a different way of running product to some extent, versus in enterprise software, there's no ad supported models. So you have to charge the customer the value that they get out of your product upfront. Right. If your product is useless, he'll take a 2-week trial, sure. But if your product is useless, he's not going to continue using your product, right? So there's, with enterprise software, there's a lot more focus on providing very clear value upfront. I like that personally. It's a more black and white thing for me, right? I don't have to worry about only user acquisition in terms of free users, and I don't know how I'll monetize them, and we'll monetize them in the far future, or when the VCs push us kind of model, or when interest rates rise or whatever. But most enterprise software, at least even from day one, you will charge something for your software. Now you can say you charge less. That's a different thing. But you have to charge money, and you only can claim you have users when they're actually paying you out of their pocket. Even if you get $100, you run SaaS, there are a bunch of SaaS you can buy for $10, $20, $50 a month. But that's someone who has either gone through a process or taken out their credit card, right? And they're actually paying you money for something you've built, which proves what you've built has value. So I'm more attractive to that school of thought kind of thing. And yes, you get to talk to very large enterprises, very large customers who will directly tell you what are the things they want to, let's say, give you a lot more money, for example. That's the other interesting bit. You have a much more correlated action and reaction to some extent.
Your efforts are directly sort of related to, if not proportional, but directly related to, in some sort of by some sort of formula related to the value that people will achieve. So yeah, I think that's okay. That's what makes you excited. So another thing that you said, and I think what we were talking about. So of course there is market difference between enterprise software and consumer, but then there is SaaS. Within SaaS there is enterprise SaaS and your true blue SaaS, right? Which is also very different. And you and I, both sort of work on enterprise SaaS. why don't you spend a few minutes on, what is the difference between SaaS and enterprise?
From an enterprise SaaS perspective, and we've chatted about this actually outside of this forum. One of your biggest challenges is there's a whole framework you have to worry about other than just building the software, which can be an interesting pain at times, but it is the cost of doing business, to speak, right? If you're selling to large enterprises, even if you're building SaaS, especially if you're selling globally, okay, I'm assuming you're not selling only in India, but at a global level, when you sell tech, enterprise SaaS or vertical specific SaaS as well, you have 500 small things you need to take care of. Yes, there is the basic hygiene around security, ISO, things like that. But you realize how sensitive enterprise customers can be in terms of the fact that, yes, it is SaaS, but that doesn't mean you can update it every 3 days. For example, your customers have certain expectations, certain workflows they get used to. If it's a large customer, they spend hours maybe training their users, enabling them to use certain stuff. And so, while theoretically as a startup, it is obviously always easier to say, move fast, break things, keep trying out different things and so on. The minute you have large enterprises as customers, you have to think from their perspective, right?
Absolutely, diametrically opposite.
Yeah. They don't want you moving fast and breaking flows. They would rather have a stable set of workflows for 6 months.
Absolutely. 6 years, believe me.
Which is true. So I think that becomes interesting. So there's a different set of requirements that almost some of these customers will have around security, RBAC access, role-based access is required. So audit trails are very, very important to them. These are a lot of things that, forget consumer apps, but even if you're building SMB, it's easier to sell to SMB because even if you don't have some of this, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But if you're selling to a large enterprise, if you don't have single sign-on or Okta kind of support, SAML, they're probably not going to look at your product, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So all of those things fall into that category of they will want high availability. They will want you to have certain security certifications. They will ask you questions. They will want a number they can call, by the way. No matter how little you want to charge an enterprise expects bespoke, high touch support, but willing to pay for it. That's the interesting part. Right? I've seen examples like, AWS, you can go sign up. Yes. But you know what? If you're a large customer paying AWS $5 million a year, you have a number you can call. You have a dedicated architect who will talk to you about your architecture or tell you how he can help solve your problems. So it's even for a company like AWS that caters to across the stack set of customers, there are differences in how they treat those customers. So enterprise customers have to be dealt very nicely. Let me put it that way. But then on the reward side, they are always willing to pay so long as you can provide them what they need. So that's the good part.
Right. So DIY versus, DIFM, do it for me.
Handhold it, sell me services, no problem. I will pay you $500,000 to go implement this for me. It's fine. Take 3 months.
Yeah. I think you, even if you're a product company, you have to have that service mindset. If you want to sell to enterprise, I think that's the bottom line. I think well said. I think, that if you don't have a service mindset, it's very difficult. You can't be a snobby product, if you want to sell to
a partner. You can maybe get away with it, but then you go find a Wipro, an Infosys, a TCS, or a services partner who can do it for you, right? Where, yes, you can walk away and say, I don't have this relatively low margin business on the services side. But then you need a partner who can go do it for you. Because if you think you can sell software and walk away to a large enterprise, not happening.
Not happening.
Take some people time to learn that.
A lot of people struggle with it. And then they, I've been talking to a few people very recently as like a couple of months back. And I had to sort of, it was difficult to make them realize that you're playing a wrong game or in the wrong market. If you're not having the service mindset, it will be very difficult for you to survive in the enterprise world. And customization is the name of the game. That's what they pay for, right? So
Adoption is important. You can sell and walk away, but if they don't use your product, they will not renew. Right?
Yeah.
The renewal is after a month, 6 months, 1 year, 3 year contract. You will lose customers from a SaaS perspective or recurring subscription perspective because you didn't have contact with the customer. The guy who maybe started using it left for whatever reason, didn't do a good handover, and the new incoming team has no way of onboarding to your product, right? And that's a mix of services, obviously, but that obviously product-led growth, in-product onboarding, and so on becomes very, very important. But it's important to have those personas in mind and then figure out who will need full bespoke services and who maybe can hopefully figure their way around with a bunch of tutorials and videos and so on. So
Right. Also in the, I think I missed it in the introduction that you are also an angel investor. So tell us a little about that.
I don't call myself an angel investor anywhere.
I
We will talk about it, sure. I invest a little bit of money, which is mostly, let's say, paying taxes to some extent to the ecosystem, right? I don't know if any of it will make anything in the long run kind of thing. But it is interesting just to learn about what people are doing to some extent, right? And I usually stick to what I understand, right? So B2B, enterprise, SaaS, what else that I think will do well from an Indian startup perspective outside of this is usually health tech is something I will be interested in. Fintech, just because of personal interests. Used to be ed tech, but everyone got bought by Byju's and now we don't know what will happen. So that's the space. So, but yeah, I will just occasionally go talk to people, but always happy to give feedback, talk to people who are for B2B enterprise. Been there, done that kind of problem, I guess.
Right, absolutely. And that brings us to the end. And thank you so much, Jasnoor, for talking to us, for spending time with us today.